Discussion keeps the world turning.
This is Roundtable.
Flood season is hitting harder than ever. More rain, stronger storms, unpredictable patterns, and the need for better prevention has never been more critical. Things like faster warnings and smarter tech and less guesswork. When every hour counts, the right measures aren't a luxury. They're the difference between reaction and prevention. The fight against extreme weather is getting an upgrade, and it couldn't come soon enough. Coming to you live from our studios in Beijing, this is Roundtable. I'm Steve Hatherley. Thank you very much for joining us today. And for the show, I'm with Fei Fei and Yushan. First up, China is entering into a complex flood season, with rainfall, typhoons, and growing climate risks putting many regions on alert for floods, landslides, and urban waterlogging. But this year, the country's flood control response is showing a major transformation. What once relied heavily on experience and reactive emergency measures is increasingly becoming faster and smarter and more predictive. Today, we'll explore how new technological breakthroughs are reshaping the country's flood prevention system and offering new hope in the fight against extreme weather. Fei Fei and Yushan, good afternoon to you both. Flood control has become an urgent issue for China, not only this year, but exactly right now.
Yeah, and also when it comes to flood seasons, it's also coming earlier every year. I remember in the past when we were talking about flood controls in China, we have this saying called 七上八下, meaning the peak of flood seasons will come in July and August. That is the sort of prime time to take flood control measures. But now in May, and we're talking about in the middle and even earlier May, we're seeing floods happening not only in southern China, but also in central China. In fact, on Sunday, I think the country issued red alerts for flash flood disasters in multiple regions. So, for example, in southern and central regions, and red alerts is the highest level for flash flood warnings.
There are different levels, right? They are color coordinated.
There are 4 levels. There are blue, which is the lowest, and then yellow and orange, and then coming to the red alert, which is the most serious one, which means there are over 95% of the chance of dangerous flash flooding will happen, and with potential very devastating impacts. And that also leads to, corresponding response measures. For example, evacuation, suspend all outdoor activities, or closed off some mountain or water-related tourist sites, and also enhance monitoring, which in today's world is heavily relying on smart technologies. And also when it comes to overnight, authorities also issued some very forecasting when it comes to red alerts, flash floods in, for example, Anhui province, Hubei province, or even in Zhejiang province. And they are also issued orange alert, which is the third level when it comes to flood, the chances of happening serious flooding.
Flood control has become an urgent issue in the country this year due to a combination of things, Yushan.
Yeah, a combination of complex weather patterns. There's also extreme environmental conditions, and also there's official warnings of severe flooding across multiple regions, like Fei Fei mentioned. And yeah, you mentioned flash flood. I specifically looked that up. So flash floods refers to the sudden and rapid flooding of low-lying areas, meaning that its impact is huge.
Yeah,
and once it arrives, it's wherever it reaches and hits, there's going to be damage, more or less.
And there's no time, very limited time to react.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So the Ministry of Water Resources warned as early as this April that this year could bring severe flooding in some areas alongside drought in others. And we're calling this year, 2026, the complex flood season. So yeah, really, there's a lot of things that we are preparing, if not already prepared. Specifically, northern regions, we're also expected to face unusually strong floods. Because when we think about floods, we always think about the coastal regions or southwestern China, where there's a more basin than waterways
Beijing.
were,
Sure.
yeah.
Typhoons as well, right?
Yeah.
Typically restricted to those areas. But this time around, the typhoons are projected to move further inland during the summertime. So what type of impact is that going to have on flood control? The typhoon specifically, I mean.
Well, first of all, it means there will be more rainfalls, especially when traditionally, for example, in Beijing, we are not known to be affected by typhoons. But in recent years, we've seen storms and torrential rains coming to Beijing simply because of a certain typhoon that's been moving very strong inland. Because when it comes to typhoon, it can be very strong on the ocean.
Right.
But the minute that it made sort of a landfall in a big land area will vastly diminish. So most of the time, in the past, I think 10 years ago, for example, these kind of storms brought by typhoons can only be seen in coastal provinces like Guangdong or Fujian or Zhejiang. But now we're seeing, I think, last year or the year before, we're seeing central China, for example, in Hubei province, and even in Beijing, and even my hometown. It's a very, very inland region in Mongolia. We are also affected by typhoons.
Really?
Yeah, and that is because of the climate change issue that we've said multiple times on the show before. Is because there is the environment is warming up. That means more water is circulating in the air. That contributes to stronger winds, more rainfalls. And so the air is carrying more water and they are able to travel so long that inland regions are affected by typhoons.
Yeah.
Inland regions, also regions like Chongqing, for example, going through a difficult time right now. Chongqing has very complex topography. They have large mountains. They have river valleys there. And this combined with more frequent extreme events has made traditional monitoring, the way that we would traditionally monitor these types of extreme weather events, less effective. And that, not only that area, but anywhere around the world. And this has become, of course, an extreme global problem. But it necessitates a change towards more advanced and tech-driven responses. There's one phrase that's been appearing repeatedly in recent reports, and it's talking about the shift or the change from relying on experience to relying on prediction.
Yeah, because experiences, it's something that we've come to learn ever since thousands and thousands of years ago. Even during prehistorical times, there have been records here in China of how ancient Chinese people used to manage floods because of I think it was Yellow River, when it changes its routes, and that's by nature. Now we're talking about the increasing of rainfall. So it's making this phrase that you mentioned, Steve, from relying on experience to relying on prediction even more important nowadays, because that represents a fundamental change in how this country manages flood risks, moving just away from subjective manual estimation toward a more data-driven, real-time simulation and precise digital modeling. So in practice, it looks like it can be explained from several different aspects. First of all, is it's benefiting for the managing of the reservoirs. So the reservoir acts as a regulatory valve for a river basin, balancing a lot of different things, the immediate safety within long-term economic needs as well, because it's capable of many things too. It's capable of shaving off the flood peak. That's the first time I've ever heard of this kind of metaphor too. It's shaving off a flood peak when it comes.
And what that means is that the sudden surge of water that comes during a storm, that's where the reservoir can intercept it, that storm, and then store that water there. And then that's the job of a reservoir, to prevent downstream areas and river embankments from being overwhelmed by a single massive flood peak. You can kind of think of a reservoir as a bathtub filling up if the drain is partially closed. It's not completely blocking off the water, but it's reserving. It's reserving the water. It's holding it. They play obviously a very, very important role.
And it also helps to kind of pre-discharge the water basin, or rather the reservoir.
Yeah, especially nowadays when we're talking about rainfalls and storms, they're bringing water, the level of rainfalls that's often record-breaking. For example, this time in Chongqing, the reason that they're being so devastating is because they've seen historical broken level of rainfall.
This is an unprecedented amount of rainfall.
Yeah, they're talking about this kind of records never been broken in the history when they have any meteorological records.
Unbelievable.
And it only happens within 1 day or even half a day. So not only there are more rains, but also they're happening in a very short period of time that leaves people very limited capacity when how you can respond to this level of rainfalls. And when it comes to reservoirs, some of the reservoirs were built like decades ago, and they were built based on historical numbers, and that often the times that for example, for some coming storm, these reservoirs must release some water to create room or capacity to absorb more rainfalls coming into the future.
Right.
And that's another way of managing floods in the past, I think. But now I think I saw it on the report that, for example, in the city of Chongqing this time, when they're talking about monitoring floods and monitoring rainfalls, it's very data driven. They're relying on a lot of screens, a lot of data. They're not only talking about the rainfalls coming to the city, so meteorological authorities are being part of the forecast, but also they also need to measuring, for example, how fast waters in rivers are traveling. So they can prepare, for example, which reservoir needs to be prepared if certain reservoirs needs to release some of the waters in preparation.
Yeah, because in the past, this would be a reactive process, right? You would look at the current weather and then make a decision based on what was happening at that particular moment.
Right.
It's raining hard, so let's release some water from the reservoir. Now, what they're doing is they're using predictive measures so that they can pre-discharge that water to make more room in the reservoir for an upcoming storm.
Yeah, and this always reminds me of this whole paradox of just how much of the ways of the nature can we as human really take control and alter in our very capable resources and capabilities that we now have. That's called technology. But it's not that we're saying that we're creating a perfect system that's against all unknown possibilities, but that we have it so that we have at least something to protect us and really predict things before it happens. For example, there's one very interesting example that I did put hard efforts on in discovering what it is. It's called Dongxixi system. It's located in Tong'an district of Xiamen in southeast China's Fujian province. So what they are known for is the 3D virtual mirror of the physical river basin. So it's also called digital twin system. So by twin, it means there's the actual lakes, reservoir, and rivers. And then there's the digital replica of it. So one real one digital one, that's the twin, the digital twin.
And the twin is for the what-if situations.
Exactly, because the whole system is, it refers to the deep integration of advanced technologies such as big data, cloud computing, as well as AI with water conservancy operation. So what it does is that it creates a real-time digital replica of all the lakes, the river, the hydraulic infrastructure too via digital methods. And the reason why they really prioritize this whole system locally is because previously the local reservoirs, such as the Tingxi Reservoir, which is a very major one locally, it heavily rely on human experiences and management. But now with the twin system, they have the capability of map the real-time water levels and infrastructure conditions and manage to predict things, quote unquote, predict things before it happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, with a digital twin, they can put any scenario into that digital twin, so they can test whatever situations they can come up with and see what the responses are going to be before that situation arises. Chongqing is well known actually internationally. Got a lot of recognition here in China, of course, but also internationally as well. as a leading example in this particular field that we're talking about today. And this is exactly what the world needs, is this type of tech. But as you just mentioned, Yushan, no system is perfect. It's very, very difficult to predict what is going to happen next. But with advances in precision flood warning, it could help save a whole lot of lives in the future. And that's exactly what it's designed to do.
Yeah, and when it comes to, for example, Chongqing, I think in last year, in 2025, the city actually also faced very heavy rainfalls. And according to the city, they faced 119 floods above warning levels. Wow. So it's essential to have this kind of a digital twin network so that the city can predict and prepare and respond faster, as we discussed, because these days, when it comes to rainfalls, when it comes to extreme weather events, it's not only about the amount of rainfall, for instance, it's also about the time. And I think when we're talking about the alert system, that the blue, yellow, orange, and red alert system is another way to simplify the procedure. When certain things happen, how should we respond to that? And we need a very clear system so that everyone know their job when things happen. Because when it comes, for example, floods, you probably have a few hours to get prepared. So you need to be very clear about, for example, I'm with the meteorological authority. What should I do in this kind of scenario? And when it comes to transport, when it comes to civil affairs, when it comes to, rescue efforts, who should be doing what at what time is also very important. So I think that is another way of also on top of technology, another way of dealing and mitigating with a lot of challenges brought by extreme weather events.
The extreme weather events, it seems like it's happening more and more often around the world, which is what makes predicting things so hard, because if you don't know what's going to happen next, you can rely all you want on things that have happened in the past. But if what has happened in the past is not likely to happen in the future, meaning it's about to be more extreme and more severe and more dangerous, it makes planning almost impossible in some situations. There was a case earlier this year. It was between January and February. There were 9 named storms that hit Spain and Portugal and Morocco. And some parts of Spain received a year's worth of rain in a few days. A year's worth in just a few days. So there are different reasons for that. Scientists go into it. They say that the World Weather Attributions, their scientists found that warming made the rainfall more intense, up to 36% stronger in southern Spain, different percentages for different regions. But the problem with models, and this is the troubling part, is that climate models, they failed in that situation to reproduce the observed trend. So they showed only an 11% increase in the north and nothing in the south, even though the real world data showed much higher. So that means current models may be underestimating future risks. So that's kind of my point, is that the models that are being designed, it's very difficult to predict something that is unpredictable.
Yeah.
Because models were built based on past experiences.
Right.
So if things are going to happen in the future, never happened in the past. For example, I remember a couple of years ago in Beijing, we also saw record level flooding. And when it comes to this kind of reservoir and flood control system in place, I vividly remember one of the scientists said, we were prepared. We were prepared for 200 years of we sort of accumulated 200 or even 1,000 years of records, and then we built this reservoir. But this time, when it comes to that rainfall, is 1,000 or a few hundred years level of record. That's not been seen in the city for several hundreds of years. So there's no way that you can be 100% prepared. And also when it comes to extreme weather events, for example, in India, I think very recently is seeing also
waves.
record level heat waves. Some regions are approaching 50 degrees Celsius.
50.
Yeah, so how should they predict that in this summer I'm gonna see a 50 degrees Celsius weather out there. And even if they knew, even if India and a lot of Indian people know that we're going to embrace extreme heat waves this year, then we were talking about response measures, for example, installing ACs, building more roads that can survive in these extreme weather, heat weathers. It's not a few months of efforts. It probably takes years of planning and also technological upgrades. So that's another story as well. So it's not as easy as we think that living in a more extreme weather conditions could be on the book.
Yeah, and even for countries that's stereotypically known for receiving a lot of rainfall, such as the UK, it's not always the same, and the website use it as the level of wet weathers we have nowadays are also increasing, and they're making their preparations too, but it's been hard even for them. So the latest state of the UK climate report indicates that the UK has become wetter over the last few decades, although with significant annual variations too. So yeah, that agrees with what you said too, Steve. Even though we have all the preparations done, there's models constructed, digital avatars used for predictions, not every year has the same condition. This year could be higher than next year. It's probably not as high. So they are kind of finding this tricky because in the meantime, they think tracking flooding events within UK that's caused by extreme rainfall is much trickier, according to their National Meteorological Service for the UK too, because flooding there can be affected by just many different things, many factors, including, but not limited to, river flow rates, local soil type, and the presence of flood defenses. So no, this is not just a China issue. It's like happening worldwide.
Sure is. And we don't mean to say either that these AI advances or tech advances are a waste of time. No, not at all. These are extremely, extremely helpful. That just that one example, the digital twin example. If you can put any type of scenario into that digital twin to see how it's going to react, this is going to help people. This is going to help governments and scientists and communities better prepare for extreme situations when they do come in the future. But beyond the faster warnings and the smarter monitoring, how advanced has China become in building the underlying AI, the satellite infrastructure that powers to help to monitor disaster response here in the country?
Yeah, and Steve is quite spot on when we're talking about satellites, because when we're talking about building a digital twin system, the first thing is we need to have eyes in the system. And who can be the eyes in the system?
Satellites.
The satellites, some sensors. And that is why we heard a lot about spatial temporal industry, meaning industries that not only can cover what's happening on the ground, but also have capacities in the space, so you can get a full lens of what's really happening. So that also means, for example, we need a high precision space ground integrated network. That means, for example, we need technologies like the Beidou satellite navigation system, which can empower technologies like 5G, IoTs, Internet of Things, and AI. And that leads to, we heard a lot of news reports, of course, also talking about Beidou system now provides centimeter level accuracy for monitoring infrastructure, and that refers to monitoring what's happening on the rivers.
Yeah, the river embankment, soil erosion, things like that. You said centimeter level accuracy. That's impressive technology.
Yeah, each centimeter counts because when it comes to rainfall. And there's not only Beidou, but also the Fengyun for satellite infrastructure that now provides the high resolution atmospheric data necessary for AI models to improve heavy rainfall forecasting accuracy by more than 15%. So that means in the meantime, these systems, they're also used not only as just national data collecting, but also affordable or accessible for normal day-to-day people, you and I, because as of the end of 2025, there are over 2.2 billion Beidou-enabled terminals, and that includes smartphones, and 100 million vehicles in use, meaning that people can see weather reports and the very accurate prediction of weather from their phone or in their smart car systems that can just showcase before you go out or things like that. So it's really creating a ubiquitous ground sensing network that feeds real-time data back into disaster response systems, and that's relatable to all of us.
Yeah, and on top of that, with a lot of satellites and sensors that can enable us to build, for example, AI-powered platforms to run models to make prediction of what's going to happen, for example, 12 hours from now if the rainfalls continue like this. And also, I think earlier this year, China also launched a AI-powered sort of early warning platform that's basically open source to the whole world called Mazu, which is named after a sea goddess in southern China.
Yeah, in Macau.
Yeah, so for example, they are collaborating with countries like Mongolia and some Pacific Island countries so that they can also get the data that's been collected by the Fengyun satellites or the Beidou satellite navigation system and then run some of the models on that Mazu AI platform to see if, for example, I saw a case in Mongolia, they sort of predict a certain storm is going to lash out a certain region at a certain time, and they then issued alert warnings to the local herdsmen, and that can prevent them and saving them a lot of losses because of the storms. So that is what also I think align with what the United Nations been calling for early warnings for all, basically meaning for a lot of countries, especially developing countries, they don't have the power to have a big satellite network in
Of course
space.
not, yeah. And China's been helping out a lot with that. Their satellite, the country satellite and disaster response systems have been exported to over 140 countries, which is a huge help indeed. AI weather forecasting is helping. Digital twin rivers is helping. Real-time evacuation systems, satellite-powered monitoring networks, all helping. China's flood control strategy is really undergoing a very significant transformation. And as we discussed before, it relied heavily in the past on human experience, but it's very much increasingly becoming a data-driven system. It's built around prediction and simulation and rapid coordination. And as climate change makes extreme weather more frequent and less predictable all around the world, the challenge facing governments all around the world is no longer simply responding to disasters after they happen, but anticipating them before they strike. That is the goal.